Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a gripping historical thriller. We're looking at a story of impossible odds, brilliant strategy, and a daring nighttime infiltration that literally redrew the map of the world. You know, throughout history, certain fortifications were considered entirely unshakable. But in the annals of medieval warfare, very few strongholds struck terror into the hearts of invaders, quite like the legendary Roman fortress of Babylon in Egypt. It was the ultimate bastion, and today we're going to unpack exactly how it fell. People at the time called it a meat grinder for any army foolish enough to march against it. And look, that wasn't just poetic license. That was a terrifying geographical reality. If you were an invading force, this fortress was your absolute worst nightmare. Every inch of it was designed to completely crush the spirit and the ranks of anyone who even approached its gates. 30 feet. That was the sheer, imposing scale of the obstacle you faced. Just imagine standing at the base of a completely flat, immovable stone wall stretching 3 stories straight up into the sky. You're surrounded by treacherous terrain, and there's a highly trained elite garrison staring down at you. And the real kicker here? It sat directly on the Nile River. That meant it had a built-in cheat code for infinite supplies. They could just lock the heavy doors, sit back, and easily outlast you for years. So this brings us to the year 640 AD and a massive logistical nightmare. On one side, we have the Arab forces of the Rashidun Caliphate, led by the brilliant military strategist Amr ibn al-As. Now, they had just swept across the desert with incredible momentum, but here at Babylon, they hit a literal brick wall. Their absolute greatest asset, which was their fast-moving cavalry, was completely useless against stone. Inside, the Romans are sitting comfortably with fully stocked grain silos and heavy weapons. But out in the desert for the Arab forces, there was this invisible, terrifying ticking clock. Summer was rapidly approaching. A brutal, blinding heat was bearing down, and with it came the severe threat of disease. If Amr's army just sat outside those walls, a frontal assault would be absolute suicide, but waiting around meant they'd simply rot in the sun. It was an absolute dead end. So, when you can't go over the wall, and you definitely can't starve them out, how exactly do you breach the unbreachable? Okay, let's dive into this. Amr realized pretty quickly that he couldn't win this with military might alone. He had to shift his entire focus away from the walls and toward the earth itself. He operated on a core tactical belief. Every single fortress, no matter how grand, has a fatal anatomical flaw. So for weeks, Amr kept his main army incredibly busy maintaining a very loud, very distracting public siege at the front gates. But quietly, he sent out scouts disguised as local merchants to carefully map out the surrounding geography, searching the bedrock for any kind of hidden weakness. And what those scouts found was nothing short of mind-boggling. Deep beneath those heavy stone foundations, completely hidden from the outside world, was an ancient, forgotten network of underground aqueducts and seasonal river channels fed by the Nile. Now, because they were attacking during the dry season, these subterranean tunnels were basically just empty mud tubes. And the greatest discovery of all, one of these dried-out secret rivers traveled directly beneath the outer walls, leading straight into the absolute heart of the fortress. This was it. This was the opportunity. But you have to truly picture the insane level of risk involved here. It was pitch black, suffocatingly narrow. The bottom was partially filled with this toxic sludge and stagnant water. Under the cover of total darkness, Amr selected a tiny group of his most elite commandos. They actually had to leave their heavy armor behind. Carrying only their blades, these completely unprotected men crawled on their bellies into the claustrophobic, crushing darkness of that mud pipe. It's a crazy contrast. Above ground, you have the deafening noise of the main army crashing against the gates, creating the perfect distraction. But below ground, there's only this silent, agonizing, oxygen-deprived march. For hours, these men crawled blind through a mountain of dirt, and the stakes were literally life and death in the most horrifying way imaginable. If the Roman guards up top discovered the pipe, all they had to do was flood it with water or choke it with smoke, burying those soldiers alive in a muddy tomb. But they kept pushing through the tight stone throat of the river until, finally, they saw a faint glimmer of moonlight bleeding through a drainage grate. From the exact moment that grate opened, the trap snapped shut with blistering speed. Step 1, they quietly popped the drainage grate in the dark, neglected corner of the inner courtyard. Step 2, the muddy commandos slip out like ghosts, completely bypassing the oblivious Roman garrison, and they overpower the unsuspecting watchmen at the main gatehouse. Step 3, they slam their entire weight into the massive wooden winches holding the iron portcullis. And Step 4, Outside the walls, Amr hears the grinding metal and instantly launches a full, explosive cavalry charge. The unbreakable gates of Babylon swung wide open. I mean, imagine being those Roman commanders. They went to sleep fully believing their 30-foot walls made them completely invincible from the outside world. Suddenly, they wake up to the deafening roar of thundering hooves right outside their barracks. Thousands of Arab riders erupted from the darkness, pouring through those open gates like an absolute tidal wave. And this brilliantly illustrates the turning point of the entire siege. The Roman garrison desperately scrambled to form a defensive line, but the panic was instantaneous. This was the ultimate Trojan horse reversal. The very fortress walls that were meticulously built to keep the enemy out had suddenly become a prison, locking the Romans inside with an unstoppable, aggressive force. The whole dynamic of the battle instantly shifted from a calculated, comfortable defense into absolute, terrifying chaos. And after all that heavy fortification, what was the remaining resistance? Zero. Realizing that their legendary fortress had been completely compromised from the inside out, the Roman leadership surrendered. Think about that for a second. In a matter of hours, a handful of muddy men crawling through a forgotten pipe accomplished what months of heavy artillery, catapults, and starvation tactics could never, ever achieve. The unbreachable fortress was conquered. And the reason this whole story actually matters to us today is because of the massive geopolitical domino effect it triggered. This wasn't just some local skirmish. The fall of Babylon in 640 AD absolutely shattered the Byzantine grip on North Africa, mostly because this fortress was the strategic lock to the entire Nile Delta. Once it fell, the rest of Egypt quickly capitulated. The immense agricultural wealth of Egypt was permanently diverted to the east. Right outside those fallen walls, Arim founded the city of Fustat, which eventually evolved into modern-day Cairo. The entire geopolitical center of gravity shifted away from Rome and helped birth a new Islamic golden age that would go on to shape global trade, science, and politics for the next 1,000 years. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. What happens when an enemy is willing to weaponize the dirt beneath your feet? The defenders of Babylon thought that sheer mass, iron gates, and structural engineering made them invincible. But history proves over and over again that no fortress is truly secure if you refuse to look beneath the surface. A forgotten mud tube didn't just breach a wall. It laid the foundation for a global empire, simply because someone was willing to completely rewrite the rules of engagement. That wraps up today's explainer. Keep looking beneath the surface, and we'll see you next time.